let me welcome all of you to the June 20th meeting of the Barnstable County Commissioners, and please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And join us in a moment of silence so that we can remember all those who serve our country, both here and abroad, and for all those who have given their lives for us. Thank you. Is there any public comment?
Hi, in case I haven't met some of you.
You want to come up and
Sure,
sit here?
yeah.
That way
we can see you on the camera.
We see you by the camera.
Remember the chorus, but you'll leave as a
Didn't realize it was
star.
going to be on screen today.
Okay.
I'm Catherine Garofoli. I'm representing the Resource Development Office. I'm just reporting to you on the out-of-state training that Julie Ferguson and I were able to attend, thanks to all of you. We attended a Management Concepts Federal Grants Management and Cooperative Agreement training down in Tysons Corner, Virginia. It was a great opportunity. It was 3 days of a pretty intense class where we were learning about compliance and just the different laws that we need to focus on when reporting and managing grants and their recipients. So it was a really good opportunity.
Excellent.
Yep. And
So you learn new skills and
absolutely.
we'll keep ourselves straight and
And
legal.
who sponsored the program?
Well,
Or did you?
that would be the county sent us.
No, I mean,
who put it on?
Oh,
Who was-
Management Concepts. They're
management
a
concepts.
very well-regarded training organization when it comes to grants.
Government
and,
grants.
Government grants. And so it's actually a certificate program where you have to take X amount of courses to receive a certification deeming you qualified to properly report and manage federal money.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, does the federal government require any kind of CEUs for people who do the grants so that they know that they've kept up with the new regulations or education?
There is usually a period of time when awarded money and your interaction with like a federal funder where you go over your compliance and the different regulations that you need to follow. And reporting all the way along kind of keeps track of what you're doing and your understanding of, you know, the actions and scope of work and how it's fulfilling the funders' regulations as well.
Right, the goals that they were putting that money out for and how you're meeting those goals.
Exactly.
And it also should teach you how to develop grants in the future too, because you'll be able to read what it is they're asking for a little bit better and focus in on.
I think it puts, having staff given that opportunity to attend trainings like this not only prepares us for federal grant opportunities, but also better accounting for non-federal private foundation, because you're still reporting and you're still accounting your successes and measuring your progress within a grant program. And so I think that it gives us a good base as to making sure that we're on the right track with our money and following the guidelines on all, and not just federal grant opportunities, but private ones as well.
Great.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
If you were to have one takeaway from the course, what would it be?
For me, it was definitely following the different regulations. There are different regulations for different entities, such as county and nonprofit and tribal governments and different areas like that I had not previously been familiar with. And so gaining that type of knowledge and having it laid out as to, all right, so we're a pass-through entity to sub-awards to a town, you know, making sure that you're covering your bases with understanding the regulations that go along with that. For me, that was invaluable.
Thank you.
Sounds excellent.
I have one more question too. Given the current climate in Washington in terms of reducing spending and all of that, did you get any sense of whether or not the grants will continue as they have been, or will they be, some of them be dropped because of lack of funding?
It may not just be because of lack of funding, it's just clarifying the use of funding, being transparency of funding, and being able to account for how the money is being used. I think that the reporting with the federal government is going to become more stringent. it's not so much that the money might not be there, it's going to be for very specific things, and the reporting on that has to be on point in order to continue funding,
Right.
so.
That you're saying that you're doing what you said you were gonna do, and that the goals at
Exactly.
least are being met, and if not, evaluated why they're not being met.
Exactly, and that's on the match side as well.
Right.
So making sure you're accounting for what you said you would provide as a match. Those are very important things.
That raises another important question. We've instituted a contract with our partners. And I'm wondering whether or not that has given you any reason to, let's say, to change some of the language in the contracts that we develop. I know it's pretty much boilerplate, but we've been doing it now for about 10 years now, right? So, in order to
Are you talking about AmeriCorps?
Well, I'm talking about the contracts that we sign with the, with the communities for delivery, both, under the EDC and under some of the other contracts that we do for grants. And we have one that, that's underway right now. But I was just wondering as to whether or not that gave you any sense as to whether or not the contracts that we sign with, with partners, as to whether or not we need to change that in order to meet these new, more restrictive federal requirements.
I think that it really depends on the funding source. I believe that the grant agreements that you all sign when we have sub-awards throughout the community does cover all the bases, and it covers our actions. And compliance for that, I feel, is fairly straightforward for towns and other entities. So I think that right now what we're doing is exactly what needs to be done. It's the making sure that the reporting and the accountability is there.
Sort of, just to answer Bill's question though, we do reviews of those all the time. And in fact, we just finished one, has nothing to do with really the grant piece of it, but we just finished reviewing those that we use for the dredge. We made a few changes, some of the towns had a couple comments on them. We hadn't changed anything in, since the inception of the dredge program in '98. So we had gone through it and we made some changes to it. So we do that, Bill, periodically. Kind of keep up.
Great, excellent.
Well,
Thank you.
before
Thank
do,
you. Oh.
You should tell everybody what RDO does for the county.
The Resource Development Office, specifically my position, I'm a Resource Development Officer. I provide municipalities and county departments assistance in writing grant proposals for funding opportunities, as well as help them along with the process. If they want to tackle writing a grant proposal, then I can sit down and go over the process with them. I also look for various grant opportunities for county departments and any other projects that I think would fit well. So.
It's an important regional service.
It's very,
been
it's
long
very,
going.
and a lot of people don't
And
realize that we have it.
this week is actually my 1-year anniversary of being with the county. And since my time starting, I've submitted 25 grant proposals, and nearly half of them have been funded.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Oh, you've done a good job.
Thank you.
Well, that's
You'd be leading
very
the
good
American
reporting.
League.
I know. Better than Red Sox.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Could
you.
you tell me your name again?
It's Catherine Garofoli.
Garofoli.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Can we just go to the summary of items before we take the agenda item? Because there's a few here that, I did mark this page, so I just have to look at them for a minute. Yeah, I guess 2, 3, and 4, establishing new funds, one's for the e-permitting, one's for Children's Cove, and one's for the Lyme disease. What triggers having to establish a new fund?
Typically, a grant award.
A grant
So we will set a
award.
grant award, any new grant award up in a separate fund, track the money separately, do everything that needs to be done, sort of as Catherine was just saying, to comply with all the grant requirements. Most of them require you to track the money separately, basically, is what it really amounts to. You can't commingle the grant money with general fund money, basically. They don't want you to do that.
It raises a question about whether or not we have to, under federal guidelines, establish a separate bank account for each one of these.
No, it's strictly an accounting piece. You don't have to keep your money in a separate bank account, although there are some instances where that happens. It's very rare. But in this situation, a separate fund on your munis accounting tracking systems.
Okay, so it's basically a separate chart of accounts for this particular.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, and then 16, amendment with the Executive Office of Administration and Finance, extending the duration of the innovation grant. I do know that they had a very short timeline for
Yeah.
all of this to take place, which it isn't going to happen because the time is too short. Is that what this relates to?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah. I don't know exactly what the extension date is, but it would say it'll say in the package. I did see Elaine and Ed meeting today going over, so I know they're working diligently on it. I don't think the bids are due at this point in time yet, but they certainly are due soon, so.
And I had a question on transfer requests for IT, health, number 10, Commissioner's Office and Dread. What were our requests?
Probably these have to do with sort of year end, people are moving money around. Remember, any money to be moved around within a department's budget, they can move around Group 2, which is basically professional services, contractual services. Group 3, which is supplies and materials. Group 4 is sort of miscellaneous charges. And Group 5 is equipment. Within those 4 groups, they can move money between line items or between those groups with your permission.
Okay.
So that's what those are.
That's fine, thank you.
And 26 is the agreement for the disposal of unacceptable waste. Where does that come from? Agreement with New England Recycling for the disposal of CD.
Hazardous waste?
Construction and demolition waste.
Yeah.
Mostly. Things that can't go to CMAS, we put together a regional bid to help the towns dispose of their
Capital.
the stuff that, basically it's not MSW, municipal solid waste.
Mhm.
All that other stuff they have to deal with in some way, shape, or
Buildings,
form.
refrigerators, copying
Construction demolition is
machines,
the big stuff,
construction,
demo
yeah.
stuff, like demolition stuff.
Right.
So we have been working on a regional bid for the towns to participate in, that's what that is.
Okay, good.
And then how about 29? They, for the transportation of municipal solid waste.
Similar
thing?
type thing, yep.
This-
We're
these
doing
are-
regional bids, because we don't have MSW, so, except for our own.
Right, that's what I thought. And
So
But
we're
we're-
working on that on a regional basis, a regional bid for the local communities.
see, all those good things we do for the towns that they don't know about, so we want you to know about them, all of you people at home.
Hear that out there, folks?
Okay.
I think
All
that's
right,
it.
with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move that.
No, I will second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Unanimous. The motion carries. So now we will go back to our agenda item, which is the special commission's recommendation for county governance.
So we printed that stuff out, I have some copies here, and hopefully, it was kind of a little bit hard to print out, in fact, it's a machine.
Well, actually, we have it printed out.
Well, we tried to do it, it doesn't work on a regular piece of paper, so we tried to do
Well,
it.
actually, I did get it when we working with a piece of paper.
It must be impossible to read, but
No,
anyway.
no. Even I, with my poor eyes.
So we printed it out. So this is the spreadsheet that I had put together, and I think people in the audience have probably seen it, but
You need to, for people at
for
home,
people at
that know
home
what
who
we're
have it,
talking
all
about.
three of you
Probably
probably.
should give copies to
Um,
people.
I didn't
They
want to
have-
get-
Oh, they
What
have-
I did, based on your request, was go through the Barnstable County Charter and sort of actually read it, cover to cover, and start putting in little columns sort of what the powers.
Is that,
That's an extra copy, yeah.
okay.
There's probably other extras down there somewhere too. In terms of sort of, and what emerged as I was doing this is there are some sort of what I call overarching powers that the county itself has, that sort of are kind of crucial to its existence. So the first column that I said was these overarching powers. They're sort of the powers that create the county and give it the oomph to do what it needs to do. And then I went through Articles 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., and then sort of gave the powers to the three sort of other administrative columns that we have. The legislative powers that go to the Assembly of Delegates, and they're basically spelled out in Article 2 of the Charter. The executive powers, which are really under the county form of government in Massachusetts exercised by the Board of County Commissioners. You're actually called Board of Regional Commissioners now, based on the 2000 charter change. Most of those are in Article 3. Also in Article 3 are some powers given to the administrator of the county, the administrative function, the county administrator. And you'll see in Article 3 for the executive and the county, they're very similar. They're sort of repetitive, and they almost say the same things. They change a couple of words here or there. So those are really the three pieces, and I went through and sort of outlined in a more specific manner exactly what each of those powers are. They're all listed in each of those 4 columns, and that's what you essentially have before you. And I guess I can walk through if you want and sort of summarize to some extent what each of them are.
I think it would be helpful if we took them one by one, because I was thinking, if you look at the assembly and what their powers are, since they're first on the list, start with them. We're not.
Well, actually, I would have said that sort of the
Overarching
overarching
powers.
one, the sort of the foundation, I guess, is
Okay.
how I put it, of what we do. And it's,
Right.
you know, it's sort of common sense, but when you are thinking about sort of redoing your government or putting a different government, you sort of have to remember these because you can't leave them out, otherwise you can't function.
Yeah, and,
So-
well, yeah, and that whatever you're going to, whatever the end result is going to have to be able to do these.
Yeah, and
Is it going to be able to do it more efficiently? Is
Right,
the
and
whole
sort of-
purpose of the exercise.
if you look at sort of the first one, Article 1, Section 3, really the charter was designed to give the county as a regional entity as broad powers as you could possibly construe. So basically, as many sort of these charters or constitutions do, it says, unless it specifically says somewhere that you can't do it, you can do it. Now, you know, as we go on in life and we realize things, and you come to bond counsel especially, they don't always read things that way. You know, they're a little more belt and suspenders on many of these. But it's sort of reflective of what the founding fathers sort of want. They wanted to give you as many powers as they possibly could.
So that famous phrase that you find in a lot of pieces of legislation at the state is notwithstanding any general or special law to the contrary, you can do
Which is
almost
in the
anything.
charter, exactly.
Yes.
That's in.
Okay, so, well, and this is what I'm looking forward to doing in this exercise, is to establish what authority we have and what its limits are. And I think we've been talking about what our capabilities are. And then knowing what our authority and our limits are of that authority, I think then we can start to take a look at how we feel about what to do with that. And I think that's our intent today, right?
Absolutely. I was thinking, going through this, and this is really helpful, I have to say, is separating these powers out, that it will allow us to form a narrative, so to speak, of when you're looking at what are the overarching powers of the county, then you can describe them. And you might even be able to somehow attach a certain element of where that, maybe how often those powers are used, or maybe infrequently or very often. Are they good powers to have? Not. But it would allow us, I think, as we look at them broken down this way, to form a narrative of what the powers are, what the overarching powers are of Barnstable County government.
And of course,
So we define ourselves by our powers, actually, is what we do.
yes, we do. And that's what the Constitution does.
Yes.
Okay, because that establishes what power we have.
Right.
And in
So-
doing that, one of the questions I think that that I hold in my own mind is, the paramount thing is, in what we're looking at, how are we maintaining a high level of representation and the application of checks and balances to what we do as we discuss these things?
Okay, so, let's start.
So as you go through this, some of it's a bit of a civics lesson, so I sort of apologize in that. It sort of sounds that
Well,
way. It's not intended to be, but that's what it comes out, because under Mass General Law, in order to be a thing, you have to have certain powers in place so that you can write checks and do all the things that we do sort of every day. But I just wanted to sort of draw your attention that the intent really from the framers of the county was really to give the county as broad powers to do things on a regional basis as they possibly could. And one of those is the, it says broad power to enter into agreements with other governmental entities, or to be an agent for any other unit of government. So those are things that we've exercised. I think there's some opportunity in there to probably do that more as we go forward. And then some of this is sort of the Civics 101 stuff, organize and regulate its affairs. That's in Article 1, Section 6. You have to do that, adopt, amend, or repeal ordinances, acquire, construct, or maintain public improvements, projects, or enterprises. If we want to build a building, you build a building.
That's one that's always been in question, because in a county that has governance and governing, that's where the Department of Public Works and those sorts of things come in, for road building and things like that.
Well, but you have to look at this as sort of how it's used in the civics context, not necessarily. So when they say public improvements, they don't necessarily mean roads, bridges, although, at some level you could construe that it does. But it's meant to be on a broad basis. It means if you wanted to build something, you could build it. And if it's on your own land and you wanted to build a new office building, you could do it. And it's sort of, I think you could construe it to say, if you wanted to say, okay, all you towns out there, do you want to combine all your public works agencies into one regional mega agency? Could we do that? Yeah, I think we could.
Can we go back a little bit to the broad powers with agreements, so that we just spend a little bit of time on each one? That's pretty easy. I mean, we have agreements with various municipalities with the dredge. We have agreements on the dredge. We have agreements through the extension service. We have agreements now in, say, for instance, with Wellfleet now, in providing technical services related to the IT.
IT department stuff, yeah.
So, and then an agent for any other unit of government. What example would you use for that? How would we be an agent? Would we be an agent if we, no, I don't know.
What is the
Another
question?
section
What is
further
it?
on.
Sort of
We're talking about,
that.
we can be an agent for any other unit of government.
So that means like we could be the fiscal agent, or we could
Correct.
be the,
That's right.
administrative agent.
That's right. I'm trying to think of a specific
Yeah,
instance,
I was-
but
Yeah, I mean,
they're
but-
not springing to mind.
Well,
That's what
just like
basically
what
it
we
means.
did with the Cape Light Compact, that we were the agent for
Exactly,
them.
that's a very good one, yeah.
We're the agent for the WIC, we're the agent for the
Right.
regional network to end homelessness,
So,
Where,
the appointing authority for the
the commission, Cape Cod Commission must have a certain,
Well, the commission is a
They're-
bit different because
they're under a different
their enabling act and our charter are sort of inextricably woven, so it's a little bit different, and so they're made a department, and that's a
right,
very
they're
specific.
woven, but they're really woven through administrative services that we
Well,
really do,
it's
because
sort of-
their act gives them
It
some
sort of
sort of
specifically
space.
says they're a department in here, because we'll
Yeah.
get to that.
But I think just a couple of examples of what this means is very helpful. Organize and regulate our affairs, that's pretty clear.
Right,
Adopt, amend, or repeal ordinances.
right.
So that's the overarching powers of the county. That is, we're not
Correct,
just talking
right.
about the commissioners, we're talking about the overall powers of the county, we can do that. And there's a process. for
And there's a
doing
process
that.
that's laid out, right.
And then we just talked about the public improvements projects.
Well, don't forget, you have to sort of look at section 1, or article 1 rather, remember this is at the sort of 10,000 foot.
Right.
So when they say broad power to enter into agreements with other governmental entities, well, Catherine was just sort of talking about that. Anytime you get a grant, that's an agreement with another governmental entity. It could be the state, it could be the federal government, it could be something like that.
AmeriCorps.
So sort of when you say, well, what powers counties do you have? You have to say, I have the power to enter into that kind of an agreement with the federal government. They can give me money. You can give them money. You could do something for them, So that's sort of how it is. You have to sort of look at it at the 10,000 foot level, not necessarily at the day-to-day
Right,
operational level.
right, it's the big picture.
Yeah, it's the big picture piece of this.
Okay.
We talked about construct or maintain public improvements projects or enterprises, such as the dredge. I think you would consider the dredge an enterprise. We have the powers of eminent domain, borrowing and taxation to the extent authorized by the charter and by law. So you have to go to the legislature to get any of those powers.
Yet our powers of
Other than-
taxation are really strictly within the county and the towns. It isn't, broad. It's not a
You
broad power
can't
to
create
tax.
your own tax,
Right.
except as such that are enunciated in your charter, and as we'll
Say
get to.
that again, say that again for the people out
You
there.
can't just
Yeah.
create
Your own tax.
You
Right.
have to,
Everybody else.
Nor a taxing authority.
right, you can't, the charter gives you basically two taxing
welcome.
pieces.
Thank
The
you.
county tax and the deeds excise tax.
Right.
It then, when they created the Cape Cod Commission, added commission tax assessment as well. So
But that was all legislatively done.
That's all
It was all
legislatively
voted
done,
on. It's
exactly.
all
Just
by
as
the people of the region.
just as the charter was legislated,
Right.
done, piece of legislation.
So when people are out there saying those three are creating an NWRA that's gonna
They
tax
can't.
you, they don't understand that we can't do that.
They can't do that, we
All we
can't
can
do
do
that.
is-
The legislature could do that, but we can't.
All we can do is work on a series of solutions and present them to people and see what they want to
Mhm.
The legislature could do it and blame us, they could do that.
do. Yeah, well, we're not gonna give them that opportunity.
Exercise powers over regional government, some of this is a little redundant, but, they're sort of covering all their bases, so to speak. Of course, sue and be sued, have a corporate seal, contract, be contracted with, buy, sell, lease, hold, dispose of real personal property, appropriate and expend funds for county purposes. Those are all sort of the keys under Mass General Law to being a thing. If you want to be either a town or a county or an authority, you'll see in anybody's enabling legislation, that's what it'll say. It gives them the power to do all that stuff. Sign agreements or contracts with other governmental units for the provision of a joint, coordinated, or cooperative service or function. So one of the key sort of things that gives you the ability to do things on a regional basis, to enter into instruments, that type of thing. And then farther, so that's Article 1, so that's sort of your foundation powers, I guess is what I would call them.
So there are broad powers, but there are also limits within those broad powers.
Yes, exactly.
Not
right.
broad powers to do whatever
No,
one would think.
And then sort of also in Section 5, there's some sort of broad things given to the county. 5.2 establishes your fiscal year, of course, July 1st to June 30th, as most municipalities are in Massachusetts. Section 5A, Article 5A, Section 1 establishes the county tax. It basically says that you can do what the county tax allows you to do, I think, in Chapter 34, or Chapter 35 of the Mass General Laws.
Wouldn't it be easier if we had 13 accounting periods? Year after year after year.
13?
13, you would have 4 weeks. Each
Oh, I see what you're
period is
saying.
4 weeks,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you'd have 13 accounting periods, and that's it. And each year, the dates
I
may
never
change a
thought
little
about it.
bit, but the 13 accounting periods stay the same, and it's so much easier to compare revenues and
Oh, yeah.
expenses.
Screws and units
It's-
almost.
Huh?
It really it always works for mortgages. because
Anyway,
you can
one of
pay-
these
You can pay
days-
off your mortgage.
Do you know what
about
it's
2 years
like
in advance.
For a community, like in a leap year, and all of a sudden they forgot that it was a leap year, and when the budget was done, all those monies for salaries and everything else would not be in the budget, because it's July 1 to June 30th of the following year, but if you don't remember that it's a leap year, it can really be. And then each
Well,
month
even-
has different
Right.
numbers of days,
Right.
and to try to compare is nearly impossible. And the best way to, well, anyway.
Well, that's how I
Something to
actually,
think about.
but
to
I
see-
do it in, because when I do our payroll, I do it in 2-week segments. So I count up the number of 2-week segments, because that's how we pay.
Well, that's almost like
then-
that because it's 26 weeks.
But see,
26 days.
but at the end, sometimes there's there's either 1 or 2
Extra
extra
days
days.
in the fiscal year,
So I add that in,
yeah.
or subtract, depending on whether you have to add it in or subtract
Work
it
it
out.
out.
So that's what I do, so that's my adjustment for
Oh,
that.
well, that makes it
Which
pretty
makes
easy.
sense,
So, I
yeah.
mean,
So-
I guess
And
we have to
then-
get out of the Patrolman method of measuring time and get to a modern accounting measurement method. It really
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's why I sometimes say for people who are in the private sector, have a difficult time when they get into the public sector, and they have things like this that they they
Yeah,
can't
they
deal
can't.
with because they're not used to.
I will tell you one thing that is very, it's not a, it's a problem in the sense that it's very confusing. Federal agencies seem to be, well, they're on in
October.
and that screws everything up in terms of trying to keep track, especially if you're tracking, you know, your expenditures on a sort of project basis. So you get a grant from the federal government, and all of a sudden their timeframes are wacky. You know, it's not on July to June and any stretch of the imagination. And then you see that at some others too, where they'll have different fiscal years. So their sort of grant approach to something, you'll have these odd dates where it's good through March 31st of whatever. So that can be a bit of an issue.
Well,
I don't know what to do about it, but.
Well, another piece of this is the reporting piece, because if you are required to report according to someone else's fiscal year, and then people make comparison between what you've done in your organization in your fiscal year versus what you've had to report in another fiscal year, there seems to be a disconnect. And sometimes the explanation that that we make with regard to that isn't accepted, and actually it's required by law that that we make these different types of reporting. And it does lead to confusion.
Yeah.
Oh, that we lived in a world where everything was consistent.
Yes.
So
Well,
Article
anyway.
5A then is where the revenues lie.
Right.
So those are sort of key pieces. I mentioned Section 1 is the county tax assessment, linked to Chapter 34, I believe, of the Mass General Laws. Article 5A, Section 2 is the deeds excise tax. As you know, we get our own deeds excise assessment. It can be up to the assessment that the state issues, and we're just below that at this point in time. And then Section 3 was added, and it is the Cape Cod Commission tax assessment, really mirrored to the county tax assessment in terms of how it's apportioned to each of the cities and towns. It's also very similar to the Cape Cod Mosquito Control Project's assessment. It's certainly not at the level. I think their budget is about $1.7 million or so. But I met with them the other day. You'll be getting a letter. They would like you to look into bringing the mosquito control project under the county's administrative umbrella. That's why I mentioned that.
So that's something that we may want to consider next week on our agenda.
And I think it's one of the,
Greg Miller called me as well.
What?
Greg Miller called me as to what to do. I told him to get in touch with you. Apparently.
yeah, he wasn't
Yeah.
there the other day. I went to their board meeting. He wasn't there, but yeah, I met with their board.
Yeah, I've heard it in several sectors already, so.
The good news is they have their own money, so.
Yeah,
I told them we like
that's
that.
No subsidy.
So that's sort of the foundation
overall.
pieces of the county's powers. And then, I agree, then sort of next in the charter is,
Well, just to make a comment on it, we have broad powers in terms of being able to pretty much respond or be proactive on agreements, on working with the municipalities, on creating ordinances. I'm trying to make the county more of a regional government so that it provides more regional services. There's a lot about that in the
yes.
in the charter. And then the assessment part of it is just pretty didactic. I mean, this is what it is. You have certain powers and certain limits, and this is as far as you can go. So the taxation piece is pretty much set. There's not much we can do about that, except we have a little bit of room to raise the deeds tax.
Right.
If we so chose, but
Right.
that's not obviously an option that we would
Well,
want to
actually,
follow.
I think the language has to be looked at because we are authorized.
Goes up 2.5%,
We
something.
are authorized to do that. We're also authorized to raise the basic part of it within the total authorization that we have. So when you say raise
The
it,
basic part.
well, I
Yeah.
think there's always a confusion when we talk about raising the deeds tax, that somehow that is an additional tax and not part of what our authority covers already, because we have an authority within a particular range, And we've never exercised that whole range.
Right.
But we do have the ability to move in that range without going for legislative action.
Right.
So the issue becomes, or the confusion becomes for some people is, well, you're able to move that figure based upon what the Assembly supports. Why doesn't that also imply that you have the ability to move in other areas as far as raising, taxes or let's say assessing taxes in addition to that? So I think that's a
Well, I think
distinction.
the simple answer is because the law doesn't allow it. I mean, I don't know how
That's
else
what
to
all they,
answer it.
yeah, and we
You know,
can't go beyond that.
do what the law says you
Bill
can do.
said, so.
And the law says that we can assess a deeds tax up to the amount assessed by the
Right.
state.
Right,
And
We are not up to the amount assessed by the state.
Right.
probably
We're
one
below
of the
that.
only, or few, if only, county that is not assessed.
But don't forget, most of the others, I shouldn't
Are
say
not
most.
there anymore.
They don't have it. They don't have this. This was something we chose.
Oh, they don't have the deeds tax.
Right, they
Oh,
don't have
right.
They don't have a
this
funding
separate part
source.
of it.
We have some sort
No,
of.
that's part of the other
That's true.
counties' issues in terms of running on a regional basis. They don't have sort of this foundation money that they can kind of refer back to do these things, so.
So going forward, if one of our goals, at least from, as I suggested to the Special Commission on Governance, and also at our request, is that we wanted to have a county that has sustainable revenues.
Right.
And the revenues, in a sense, are sustainable, but they don't go anywhere. I mean, there are caps on them. You can't raise them except for the deeds excise tax. And there's going to be a point in time when, just like the towns, some of those taxes can go up 2.5%.
Right.
But we see what happens to the towns, because they can only go up 2.5%
But
with
even,
their tax levy.
yeah.
And it just, the crunch time is gonna come one of these days.
Correct,
It's either that
yes.
or decrease the budget and not provide the
That's
service.
a very good point. If we have one sort of Achilles heel, it's that sort of your main revenue stream is susceptible to sort of market conditions and doesn't have sort of a built-in escalator. When you mention a town can go up 2.5%, they can go up 2.5% on the sort of property tax, but it's the bulk of their revenue stream.
Right.
Off the top of my head, I don't know what the percentage is of the total town's revenues.
Well, I
80,
can tell you that
75?
in Falmouth, about 80% of the revenue comes from the property tax.
There you go. On ours, it's not that at all. You can go up 2.5% on the county tax and 2.5% on the Cape Cod Commission tax. Together, that's about 5 out of your $24 million project. So it's only about
Yeah,
20%
so,
of your budget.
so we don't have a sustainable revenue,
Yeah.
which is all the more reason why we want to look at providing regional services.
Did you just say that our taxes are 20% of our revenue?
It's sort of two things, Sheila. The taxes that I mentioned, the county, the
Commission,
the
Cape Cod
commission tax
Commission.
and the county tax assessment, those can go up 2.5%.
Right.
But that's only 5 million of your about, let's say, $25 million
Right.
budget. Your biggest chunk, which is your $7 million chunk of that, is the deeds tax. Well, but that's a market rate,
That's exactly
basically.
right.
It can go up, but the good
Right.
days when we were fighting about money, which
I really
was
wish
the good
I
old
was here
days.
then.
Fighting
Don't you?
over money.
We were fighting over
We
money.
would've
We were
done
giving
It
you
was
away.
terrible, it was terrible.
John Doan at the meeting with the mosquito control, he says, yeah, you guys gave us 50,000, whatever it was back then. I said, yeah, those were the good old days, we were fighting over money. It was, we were collecting under the deeds tax like $10 million.
Right.
And so we had surpluses and we were all
We also
happy
gave
but
$1
fighting.
million
over
back
it.
If
to
we
the
only
towns at
lived
that
into the
time as well.
future back then.
And then that came down to the point where we, a few years back during the really lean years, I think we collected maybe 5.5, 6 million. So now it's sort of stabilized at this sort of $7 million number. But who knows what it will be, in the future. We don't
Well,
know.
not to dismiss it, but we've learned a lesson based upon relying upon the volatility of a market. We've seen that stabilization, but at the same time, we have a responsibility that if we see revenues improve, the first thing to look at is how do we put the county equivalent of a rainy day fund in place to support some of the revenue continuing requirements, how to fund gas fee, how to fund many of the other obligations that we have before we start adding programs. Because at the time, there was an appetite for supporting very important programs. I don't believe that there was any program that has been supported that was not worthwhile. But now we're faced with the fact, and we have the lesson of history that tells us there is always infinite need and only finite resources to take care of the need, and it is not provident for us to spend all that we have before we put something aside to prepare for the future.
So that's why we need to look at these regional efforts like the e-permitting. I mean, here's an opportunity, because if we're going to be responsible for the regional area network, and it's going to have applications in there that we're going to want all the towns to use, and for a small fee, but it's going to create efficiencies for the towns. It could be personnel, it could be equipment, it could be anything that would create the efficiencies, and then the county would get that resource to continue to create those efficiencies for the municipalities.
Yeah.
And indeed, that's addressed in the Acts of 801 under the end of Section 16, where it specifically says that based upon the need to develop effective services to meet problems which cross town boundaries and which cannot be met effectively on an individual basis by the municipalities or the state, this act shall be construed as intending to give county power to establish innovative programs and to perform such regional services as the Constitution of the Commonwealth and the general laws permit, and to establish such other programs and services as may from time to time be permitted. So far, we have been operating within the intent of what the Acts of 801 have done, and I think that that's what this is.
Right, and it's very logical.
Yeah.
That it allows us to be a sustainable county, but it also allows the municipalities to be able to have services at less cost to them,
Right.
all the way across the board.
Right.
So it works both ways.
And
It isn't just to build an empire, it's to really create efficiencies that are being requested.
And it's not, I don't
This
see it
is
as
what the intent.
And that's a good paragraph.
I don't see it as a fatal flaw, as a
No.
sort of revenue issue, but it's something you have to consider sort of
Right.
with whatever emerges from, our discussion
What would be the need?
here. And part of the answer might be, from a policy perspective, you choose not to try to do anything else, and so really what emerges is sort of a little bit of what we have now, a fee-for-service model. So if you want to do something new, you can't bring money in from outside in the form of grants or subsidies or something like that, it becomes a fee-for-service model. The good news is I think the town sort of recognized that it's not going to be free. It's not going to be, the county will take over doing, IT services, but it won't cost us anything. I think the good news is they see that there may be opportunities in there through economies of scale to save money,
Right.
but the better news might be that it takes the burden off of them, puts it somewhere else.
Exactly right. Okay,
So I think that discussion can translate into us being able to create a narrative about what the broad powers of the county are and how they can best serve the needs of the towns, and even using some of the language from Section 16 as to why it really supports our objective, which is to provide these services to the municipalities and to help create these efficiencies, because there are mutual benefits for that. So I think a good narrative, I'll work on a narrative.
Okay.
I think it's good to have a narrative, because when people say, well, what do you do? Well, you can give them the narrative, and it may be housed in broad language, but nevertheless, then you get to the various, you get to the assembly, then you get to the commissioners themselves, and then the county administrator, and then it begins to come together. And then it can be a document that people can read and understand.
but then where do you go from there? What I think is then we have to take a look at, so this is what we do.
This is what we have now.
can do, this is what we do, and what are we doing well, and what aren't we doing well out of that, and how can we do something better? I think that that's the next step of that exercise, so that we can,
And Sheila, to piggyback
and who
on
knows,
that-
maybe we're,
To piggyback on that, I think that at some point, we have to articulate what our vision of the future that, that we're trying to support, because I haven't really heard any flesh on that as yet.
Right, what do we think
That's-
county government should be
I
doing
don't know
in
what are the needs of the community.
in the future, and how can we,
That's what
what should we be doing in future? So what do we do now, what do we do well, and what can we,
That's when we sit
What do
down
we
and work
have
on
to
our strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan,
well,
which we haven't done in a couple
No.
of years.
Yeah, we haven't done one in
Yeah.
a while.
But
so
We
that'll be
haven't
good.
done one in
Yeah.
a while, so that's our next
but
step.
let's get through this one first.
Well, yeah, but this is going to help us do that, especially when it's all very clear,
Okay.
then it'll help us know. And then we do some sort of, I wouldn't use the word consulting, but having meetings with little groups like town managers. These are our broad powers, here are some thoughts we have. We're working on a strategic plan, or here's the first big bullet on our strategic plan, regional services, or something like that, and get some ideas from people about that.
Yeah, they may, the town administrator,
They can
it's
be
been a while
very
since,
helpful.
since Maggie and I have been out sort of soliciting, what do they want us to, but they may have some ideas about where they'd like you to focus, whether it's,
Yeah.
I hate to mention assessing, that will come up again, but those types of things, where, let's do that, let's focus on that for the next couple
But
of years.
first of all, I really want to see, are we in the position of being able to that's what I think this whole exercise is about, is are we capable of taking those things on with the present structure we have and with the present internal administrative structure that we have? So, we can talk about all these things in the strategic plan and all of this other stuff. We're really looking at county government, the structure of it. Is it working? What isn't working, and how can that be improved? And I think that that's really what we have to do first before we start going on a roadshow saying, what else do you want us to do? And we know we're still figuring out if we're doing things, as well as we can. So, I think that's all great down the road, but I think we have to, one thing at a time here, or focus on what it is we're here for at this meeting and exercise. And also, I just want to say, I do think that the Assembly is waiting for some sort of response to it from us as to whatever those recommendations are and whatever our final thoughts of it on. I don't think we have to recreate county government and go through all of these, do all of the details. It was handed to us as much it was in a sort of a hypothetical form. And I think that we can make we can form some sort of opinion on those recommendations and forward them on and let them deliberate that section. And while we really put some meat on all of this stuff, which I think is very valuable. But, it's really about the recommendations and what we're going to do with those.
I think the reason we need to do this is so that we absolutely are all on the same page when it comes to
I agree.
what
And that's
does
a very
the
good
current
first
charter
step.
allow us to do, the Assembly to do, the Administrator to do. So when we start looking at implementing the recommendations, we have an idea of where they can fit.
Right.
Because otherwise, we have our own ideas about what we think the powers are, and maybe they work and maybe they don't. So let's move to the Assembly.
Okay, I would add sort of to that too, the good thing about sort of going through the charter, sort of soup to nuts, too, is you sort of remember what's in it, and you sort of, these issues emerge, like that issue that you brought up, I think, about the revenue. That's a good one, and it's just one of those things out there that as
Limiting.
you move forward, you have to think about, and you may choose to just leave it the way it is, which means you're sort of adopting this sort of fee-for-service model, which, as long as you understand that, you know where you are. So the legislative is in Article 2, and Article 2, Section 1 talks about the Assembly of Delegates' composition, mode of election, and term of office. And interestingly enough, that's exactly the words used in Section 9, when it talks about what has to go to
You mean
the
in
legislator.
In the 801?
In Section 9.1, if you wanted to change the charter and you wanted to change the composition, mode of election, and term of office of the Assembly, you have to go to the legislature to do it. It's
9.1.
curious that
You're looking
Article
at the charter.
3, Section
It's over here.
1,
Yeah, I have it.
when it does that about the Board of Commissioners, it's not exactly the same. So it's a little bit different in Section 9.1 for the commissioners and for the administrator.
So what is different?
In section 9.1, when referring to sort of the legislative, if you want to make changes, use exact words, composition, mode of election, and term of office. But for the commissioners, it uses a little bit different words. So I'm just pointing that out.
It uses a slight difference with the chief executive or administrative officer of the Cape Cod Regional Government.
Yeah.
Either way, although you are the administrative officer, the chief executive is actually the three commissioners.
Well, under
Right.
Article 2, if you ask me what has to go to the legislature, I might say, and I'm not a lawyer, I might say anything you change in Article 2, Section 1. Because to me, it's clear that in 9.1, the terms used in Section 1 of Article 2 are exactly the same. So that I draw a parallel. But if you ask me under Article 3 what has to go, I'm not so sure I could just say Section 1 because it's
Right, and
a
that's why
little bit different the way they use the
somewhere we're
words.
gonna need some
You
legal
know what I mean?
guidance on
And
this.
after my many years of talking to our lawyers, you have to take the words for what they're intended to mean. And that's what they always tell you. You can't ignore it, you can't read anything into it, you have to read it. So that's why I'm saying it
But
that
the
way.
lawyer's job is to argue.
Yeah, that's
a
why we
certain-
pay judges and lawyers.
That's why to argue a certain point,
So,
to interpret it.
and so a lot of the stuff on the Article 2 is really sort of organizational. So it's Section 2, it talks about organizing the assembly, the speaker's position, the deputy speaker, and the clerk. Article 3 is about assembly member compensation and how it's established, and how, as you know, it can be established by ordinance. But the assembly can't pass an ordinance changing their compensation, basically that impacts themselves. They have to wait till the next assembly.
It's 15 months.
Yeah, there's a time frame, but in general, what it means is I can't do it. A sitting assembly person can't vote on their own salary. They can vote on the next assembly salary, which may be theirs, but they can't do it for the term of office.
And it's in the first year of their election that they vote on the first year or the following subsequent.
Right.
So it's not in the, like, it's not
Not
at
like
the end of the
within their
year
same-
where they sort of set
Right,
themselves
there's
up.
a time frame.
Right.
Exactly. Article 2, Section 4, legislative powers vested in the assembly. This is one of the changes that were made in 2000, I believe. Remember, we had an advisory board on county expenditures. It was made up of select persons from the town. That didn't work very well. Sort of when I came on back in '94, I remember Dave Humphrey from Eastham was the chair. And we tried to pull a couple meetings together to get 2 people there, and I was doing, kind of finance presentations to them. And so over time, it just evolved, and what we finally decided to do was make the assembly the advisory board.
And
That's what we
indeed,
did.
the response that I got when I've asked, different people about it, I remember specifically Bob Lawton, he said, well, why should we send somebody up there when the assembly was doing that?
That's what the assembly's for, sort of, exactly. So, and then Article 2, Section 5, exercise of powers, their quorum rules, their rules of procedure. And they can develop their own, and as you know, they do have a handbook of procedures at the assembly.
As a matter of fact, one of the adjustments that they made was to allow the speaker to be elected by the membership as opposed to by the population.
A question on 2-4, which is the powers and duties of the assembly. It says all legislative powers, but they don't define what legislative powers are.
They sort of do when
Later on?
when we get to
Okay.
the next few
All right.
pages, yeah.
That's good.
Certain prohibitions are laid out, and it's really a separation of powers
255.
term is in Section 6. Prohibitions, they cannot seek to influence commissioners to dismiss, appoint, or promote any person in any position in the executive branch. Basically, they're saying, you are the personnel people, not the assembly of delegates, so they're prohibited from doing that. That's a separation of powers issue.
And I think also in one of the plans I think we most closely follow, which is the county manager plan, it does say that access to employees has to be through.
That's the next thing, exactly. Dealings with employees and officers of the county shall be through the commissioners and the administrator. So, Article 2.7 gives them the powers of inquiry and investigation. They have those powers. Article 2.8, Section 2 of Article 2, Section 8 is the whole ordinance resolution.
Before we leave that,
Yeah.
I'd like to say that that's where I see the seat of their ability to exercise direction over the auditors. And that it is that part where,
No,
isn't that where the investigation piece, that the auditors perform on an annual basis, the investigation of the financial transactions?
Yes,
No.
that's,
no, there is a
That's
specific
different.
section in Article 5, if you look at page 3, Bill. Article 5, Section 4, action on proposed budget, and also has select
Okay.
auditor and perform the annual audit.
Gotcha, all right.
That's where that power derives from.
This inquiry and investigation
I'm sorry, that's
is
section
usually, you find that in various organizations, or public organizations, and it's very vague, and it doesn't really describe what those powers are. You have to test the powers in a sense. If you think you need to make an inquiry, or if you need to make an investigation, then usually you have to be very careful about how you define that. What it is, what is it you want to investigate, and what are the questions you want to ask, or what is the information you need, which will then determine what questions you have to ask. And then you have to make sure that you work with a counsel on that, because that's where people can get into a lot of trouble.
They certainly can.
If they exercise powers of inquiry or investigation,
Mhm.
and it becomes a runaway train.
But don't forget, I wasn't there when this was drafted, and I remember the stories about who drafted it, and I can't think of the gentleman's name, but he was from Barnstable, I think,
And he also came back
Probably
on the
was an
second
attorney.
Charter Review Committee, as I recall.
David something. But anyways,
Yeah.
and I
He's
think,
still around,
don't
isn't
forget, no, I think he
No,
passed
he
away.
died.
He passed away a long time ago. These are sort of broadly modeled on the US Constitution, less broadly modeled on the state constitution, so, and then somewhat modeled on a town's
Yeah,
charter
on a
for the
town's
select.
charter, exactly.
So you have to kind of look into all these, and typically in the legislative branch, that's where you would place powers of inquiry or investigation. A sitting committee of Congress has the ability to call an executive officer in front of them and ask them questions.
Like
That's
we're doing
typically
tonight.
what
And the
And-
state,
you would do. And
And
same with the
state
state.
legislature,
And indeed, they
legislature can do that.
they can summon us to appear before them at any time.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
Okay,
So then, section 8 is the ordinance resolution piece, that you can pass ordinances or resolutions, establish an advisory council, conduct an inquiry or investigation, adopt rules for its own conduct. Some of these are, a bit redundant sometimes. Time and place for special meetings, the assembly, and then convening the committee of the whole, its election, appointment. So there's a lot of internal, some of its internal powers to govern itself.
it would be interesting to know how often these powers are used by the Assembly.
It also doesn't cover what their specific authority with regard to voting on certain matters, like for the Cape Cod Commission, where all they can vote is up or down, they cannot amend.
That's covered in the Cape Cod Commission
Commission
Act.
Act.
That's all spelled out when you're talking specifically about a DRI or about a
DCPC,
DCPC,
or actually the SEDS as well.
or about the process
Right.
for engaging, amendments to the regional policy plan. That's all spelled out in there. And maybe you raised sort of an issue, Bill, maybe you have to sort of look through there and make sure that we cover our bases. If you're kind of reformulating things, you want to make sure you don't leave anything out.
Because that part of the important check and balance that was put in when the Cape Cod Commission came to regional government as opposed to the Martha's Vineyard Commission that did not, an important part of that was the recognition that there needed to be some type of regional check and balance on what the Cape Cod Commission's power was. And I think that so far, I think it's been very effective, at least, my recollection of I think there's only been 7 DCPCs. And in each one of those, the Assembly played a key role in moving the process forward and also looking out for what I'd call the reasonable questions that had come up as part of the process of evaluation.
To the last one.
I can only speak to the ones that I was.
That was the Ocean
involved with in the vote.
DCPC.
So, Article 2, Section 8 then sort of talks about what's required by ordinance. So these are what you would call the powers that the Assembly has. This is what it can do. It can establish, and you have to do this by ordinance, alter or abolish any department, office, or agency. So if you want to do that, you got to go to the assembly. Provide a fine or penalty or establish a rule or regulation imposing a fine or penalty.
What number are you on?
I'm at the bottom of page 2. It's the last
It's
article,
Article
section
2.
8. That's
Page
where
2.
it, I'm sorry,
Okay.
it sort of,
No, that's
they sort
okay.
of break things up
Yeah.
funny in some of these articles. It's not very continuous.
Right.
So I try as good to keep them in little pockets. So it's provide a fine or penalty. Make appropriations or transfer appropriations from one agency to another, grant, renew, or extend the franchise. I'm not sure exactly what that means, and I'm not sure that one's ever one that's been exercised. Regulate the rate charged for any service provided to another governmental unit. So when George has fees at the health lab and he charges towns a certain amount to do a water quality testing, anytime he wants to amend that, he's got to go to the assembly and get an ordinance
But
passed. We've done that.
don't we include that in the general ordinance that it makes up the budget as far as what the fees? what the
No,
fees are?
we typically do not do that with a specific fee schedule and that type of thing. Same with the dredge. If we wanted to amend the dredge fee, we'd have to go to the assembly and get an ordinance passed. And we've done that.
In the private sector, that, those fee schedules and the anticipation of income based upon the fees and the volume of use is an important piece of budget development.
Typically we've done it separately though,
Yeah.
because we typically don't change the fees as we change the budget.
We're also making a projection or forecast as to what kind of revenue we expect the department to come up with. So the basis of the revenue projection is the same, we just don't call it out on the budget as an approval mechanism.
Right. No, we have not in the past.
Right, and also it states here, if I may ask or clarify, powers, okay, so an ordinance, so powers of so they would pass an ordinance or resolution to establish an advisory, they want to do an investigation. So that's their power, they could pass that ordinance and go, and they don't need us to do anything with that ordinance.
Yes, they would.
That would have to
If
come
they
back to us
They
for
pass a
our,
resolution, they don't, but if they pass an ordinance, they do.
and if we don't approve it, the ordinance doesn't go.
If we
That's
don't
correct.
approve it, it goes back for
Yes, and
reconsideration.
that's the check and balance of, you get a bunch of people who say, we are gonna get rid of those two departments because we don't see the sense in them, and if they can't do such a thing because it would have to be agreed upon by us.
But they can pass a resolution, which doesn't come under our purview.
Sort of saying, we don't like that department.
Yeah, but that's all that is basically stating a
And
statement.
part of the resolution can support the forming of a committee that would, that would look at things.
Right,
So, but by doing that, they fall outside of the part where if they had passed an ordinance, which would have the force and effect of law, they also have to look at whether or not they have the capacity to pass an ordinance that doesn't meet the constitutional requirement that their ordinances be consistent with what their ability to enact is.
with their parameters of their
Right.
power.
They could pass a resolution saying, we're going to do away with the Department of Finance of the county. But that would do away with the Department of Finance of the county because the charge is clear, you can only do that through an ordinance. So then, they could do an ordinance that does away with the Department of Finance of the county, but the ordinance requires you guys to sign off on it. So if you signed off on it, then that would be, then that would do away with the department. But if you didn't sign off on it, it didn't.
Ironically, I've heard that they're looking at that in the other direction, is to reinforce the finance department.
A&F, they were going to do, create a director of A&F. But I think Pat nipped that in the bud because she talked about us working on this very thing.
So if they create an ordinance and we don't sign off on it,
It doesn't happen.
it's dead in the water.
No,
Remember
not
No, I
necessarily.
didn't think so.
Remember the ordinance process.
Yeah,
There's a
that's what
process.
Like the law.
Yeah.
So it goes back. If we,
That if we,
If
You
we
disapprove
disapprove,
it. There's
it
not-
goes
it goes
back.
back to them.
and they have to get a
have
two-thirds
two-thirds
majority in
Correct.
order for it to
Right.
pass.
Right.
So count your votes.
If it doesn't have a two-thirds majority, it fails.
Okay.
Oh, and of course, the interesting
Unfortunately,
thing at this point.
I can't be
under-
here much longer. Do you
under
want to
the
continue
assembly.
this and I'll?
Well, we'll finish
Okay.
it up.
All right.
Under the assembly,
Um,
there is the issue of what happens to the, this business is about what happens to the negotiation of the budget going forward and things of that sort. Those were, I think, agreements that don't necessarily have the force of the, let's say, the force of an ordinance.
Yes, they do. They were done in an ordinance, actually, that you signed. There's a process there for the budget. And this happened, remember way back when we were fighting amongst ourselves and we didn't have any money. There was a
No good deed goes
disapproval
unpunished.
of the budget. And under the charter, basically, they had certain time to do certain things. And if they didn't get it done, as the charter requires them to by May 31st or something, and then there was a 10-day sort of window. So I think it worked out to be about June 10th. Then your proposed budget went into effect. And that's essentially what happened. And the then speaker didn't like that, so they put an ordinance together that worked out. It's sort of a reconciliation process. We've never done it, but there's a process for the budget specifically laid out that they send the budget over, you disapprove it, you send it back, they don't have a 2/3 vote to override, then there's a reconciliation.
I saw Tom today, as a matter of fact.
Did you? I didn't mention anything.
We're still good friends.
So there is that process, but it does have the force of law because it's in an ordinance. So. But we haven't had to do it yet.
I think we really...
Well, I just wanted curiously, Bill, you mentioned, did we include rate changes for fees in the budget? And the answer is no. Curiously, the next ones we do, authorize the borrowing of money. Every year, the budget specifically says, when they pass it, it authorizes the borrowing of money for the capital fund that's included in that particular budget. So the budget ordinance becomes the authorization to borrow for that. So they have to authorize the conveyance or lease of any real estate, adopt with or without amendment ordinance from initiative petitions. There is an initiative petition process in the charter. And of course, you have to give them the ability to amend or repeal any previous ordinance.
They do have to have real names on that, not like some of these internet petitions that have like 22 anonymous,
There's
142 people that don't live in the county.
Article
It doesn't-
7, there's a process. Yeah.
So real people have to sign this, right?
It's a similar process for any municipal
Instead of cyber bullies.
Yeah. And then just to sort of round it out, the emergency ordinance petition, we worked on that. They have the ability to pass emergency ordinances.
That worked
You
out very
have the
well.
ability to declare the emergency, but they can pass emergency ordinances. There's a process for that. Can be done at the same day, basically.
Yeah, and that was wonderful because we were able to respond to an emergency with regard to rabies, in the raccoons that, we found, they've gotten off over the bridge.
Right now, filling assembly vacancies, that sort of section is in vogue at this point in time, because it's in the town of Barnstable's hands, so they have a certain time frame to fill their vacancy. If they don't, then the assembly can fill it, so.
Is it today, the last day that Tom Lynch will
No,
have?
actually, he's done.
He's done, he will not, the Barnstable seat will be vacant today, because they have not named a successor at this point.
But he can't fill it because of having signed the
He signed his
contract.
contract, his contract was, And then Bill mentioned section Article 5, which is the kind of financial fiscal procedures,
Right.
lets them do action on the proposed budget, but it also provides that they select the auditor for me.
Now, they select the auditor. One of the assembly members made the comment that they are the fiscal body for the county, for CBAC, for Cape Cod.
Definitely not CBEC, but
No.
for the county, in the sense that they hold the power of the purse, you could say that.
For the administrative management contract
Right.
that exists between the county and the Cape Cod Compact is certainly true.
But it's not it's not, universal's not the right word, they can't do it solely by themselves.
Yeah, it's not a sole
It says it
power.
has to be done through an ordinance, so an ordinance
Right, means
they can
involvement
pass an
of
ordinance,
everybody.
you have to sign it. If you don't sign it,
Right.
then they have to override your disapproval with a 2/3 vote.
Right, and we could pass an ordinance and they would have to proceed the same way.
You can submit an
We can
ordinance.
submit it,
Yes.
we can't pass it.
You can't pass it, but you can
Right.
submit an ordinance.
Right, and if they reject it, it would come back to us.
And it would be, so if you wanted to, it goes back to sort of what are those ordinance powers?
Now you have to look at the Cape Cod Commission, because I seem to recall there was an issue with regard to the Cape Cod Commission
Right.
submitting
They could-
an ordinance to us, which
You-
they also submitted to the Assembly on the basis that they were supposed to submit it to the Assembly for action, and they were submitting it, giving it to us as a courtesy to be aware of it.
Yeah, I remember Jessica talked about this, because
Yeah.
this came up, and it's a little confusing. The Commission Act says when they submit an ordinance, and I read this as an original ordinance, I think that's how Jessica reads it,
Right.
Jessica
I did too.
of the Commission's staff, the staff attorney. Remember, if it's an original one, it comes to you, but the Cape Cod Commission Act specifically says they deliver it to you and that to the Assembly. But so then you have to go back, and what is the charter process? So who can submit an ordinance to the Assembly? You can, any delegate on the Assembly can, and there's a municipal petition way to submit an ordinance. But that's really the only three. So they send it over, but it's sort of seen as a courtesy. Here's an ordinance that may be coming your way, assuming the commissioner signed it. So that's an original. But if there's a and this has been the case, where you've signed an ordinance that deals with the regional policy plan or amendments to that or something like that, goes to the Assembly has a certain amount of time to act on it. If they don't, typically what they do is if they can't agree with what's in it, they want it amended, they'll reject it and send it back. When it comes back from the Assembly, it doesn't come directly to you. I think this is where the confusion lies. It goes back to the Assembly.
Because it was the Assembly that had the issue, so they're answering the concern of the
Yeah,
Assembly.
and then the Assembly can either yes or no, and if they yes, then it comes back to you, like an ordinance.
Right.
You have to sign it.
Right,
And if it's no,
If it's no, it's dead.
right.
The commission has to resubmit it.
Either forget it or rescind
Yeah,
it.
so I think that's where some of this confusion as to whether it's here or there lies some of the time.
And I wasn't really, just speaking for myself, I wasn't 100% satisfied with the process, during that particular time. And I still think there's still questions with regard to it. So that's another matter for
I
another
have
time.
to beg that I have to leave, and I'm sorry.
Where are we, just so we'll know?
Yeah.
Well, we're done with the,
We're done with the
Assembly.
Yes.
so next week we can take up,
Okay, that's all right with me.
take
A lot
up
of
the
good stuff.
commissioners.
Or the administrator.
Walk through.
Well, the commissioners and the administrator.
To
will
do
get
it, yeah,
those.
they sort of
Well,
mirror each other.
I'm sorry that I thought I would be able to stay.
Well, you need to
but I
be
have
here
go.
for this.
And I will schedule that, no.
So, now, what time next week? Did we
Yeah.
set a time for next week?
No, I don't think.
I don't think we
Let us
did.
do that, I forgot my phone today. Oh,
You're the
mercy.
second person
Feels
I've
like-
run into who's just forgotten her
Oh,
phone.
And don't
my
forget
God.
that, when
Yeah.
you're doing your narrative, you can narrate your narrative. You can do that now.
I can do what?
Don't
You
you
can
have
narrate, you
Siri?
can have-
You can just tell
I don't
Siri,
have
I want,
Siri.
oh, you
Yeah.
know? Oh.
Siri,
I
will
could.
you remember everything I say to you,
What?
please?
Siri will marry?
You can ask
You're
Siri to
old.
marry you, she'll say no, but.
Next week is the
You're enjoying yourself.
27th?
Right, 27. And we're now scheduled, according to this.
Now,
I'm
there's no
scheduled
assembly meeting next week, so,
We could do it in the morning.
We
maybe?
could do it in the
It's up to
morning, we
whatever
could
you
do it
do.
in the morning, we could do it whatever,
We could do it at night.
we could do it at night. We
No,
don't
we
wanna do it at
don't.
night,
We
it's
could go across
summertime.
To the tavern. and
No,
have
we
a-
have-
Yeah, we could have it over at the
Night.
tavern.
the CIDC's meeting that night,
Oh, okay,
Meeting
so.
there. at 6.
Yes,
At
so,
7.
so let's do it,
We
you
could
wanna
do
do
it
it
at
at 10? You wanna do it
4?
at,
No?
I
do it at
I don't
4,
care. It's up to
3?
you guys.
3 o'clock?
3:30, 3 o'clock?
I can do it 3 o'clock and then I'll just stay through the duration, I just won't go back.
Yeah.
3 o'clock would be good.
All
And then
right.
we could have an extended session.
Yeah,
Right,
we
if we want
could,
to.
and we could get done,
Yes,
because then we could just go to Eastham
right,
from here.
other things to think about.
I know, you don't want to do
Those
it
are
at
other
9 in the
priorities.
morning and then
That's another priority. All right,
Okay, so we'll do it at 3.
thank you for being patient. I wanted to see if there was any questions or comments from that. I'll have to
Yes,
listen.
why don't we get some public comment on
Or
our
if there are any
discussion and
questions.
see, or questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to what Mark said about the, you mentioned.
Would you identify
three-way-
yourself for the record, please?
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Judy Thomas, League of Women Voters.
Thank you.
3 ways in terms of getting ordinances. And earlier you had mentioned initiative. Is that a public initiative?
Yeah, you should-
From the public. So
Yeah.
wouldn't that be 4
Like
ways?
an initiative petition?
Yeah.
It's in section, Article 7, I always call them sections.
So there is 4 ways.
There's
Four ways,
sort of,
right.
there's this bunch, they call it different things. There's a municipal petition, there's a citizens initiative measures, so there's a whole process sort of laid out.
Page
Yeah.
27.
But one of these is a citizen referendum,
Yeah.
but one of them is a citizen that through this process, through this kind of, can submit an ordinance to the assembly. There's basically 3 ways, if I understand it. Commissioners, any assembly delegate, and the sort of.
The
municipal-
broad
Yeah,
petitions,
petition.
initiative.
Public, yeah,
Public
right.
initiative.
And does a public initiative have to have a certain amount of signatures for it to
Oh,
be
yeah.
submitted
Yeah,
and
there's-
that sort of thing?
It's
So that's
actually,
all-
I can't think of one happening. I think it's
It's like
actually.
7% of the population or
Yeah.
something, so it's
signed
like,
by voters equal to not less than 1% of the total number of persons registered to vote in the county as of the date
Right.
of the most recent state election.
so you'd have to have,
File with the
so
regional
you'd have to have
clerk.
1%?
So whatever section you're reading.
So if you
I'm
had,
reading section
if
73,
you had
I don't know if that's right or not.
180,000
No, that's
people
not the right
registered
one.
to vote, you would need 1,800 signatures?
Now, initiative petition
That's not bad.
with the clerk, petition be signed by not less than 3%
And
of
now,
the total number of
8,000.
voters in the county.
yeah,
But
3%,
not more than 25% of the signatures shall be from any
one
one municipality.
time.
Right,
Oh, I
you
see.
can't just load it-
3%.
You can't load it up.
Three
with
percent.
lots of-
Not like having one town pushing an
3%.
agenda, or 2 towns
Yeah,
together.
for you're talking about the citizens initiative
Right.
measures,
Yeah,
3%, not more than 25% from one.
Okay, so
Or
it's
one
3%, so it would be, so if that was
So,
1,800, that's 3,000 plus
It's still- it's still could be
24,
run
so
out of
it's
Barnstable,
2,400,
Barnstable.
5,400 signatures roughly, or 6,000 in between them.
Because if
I
they
thought it was a
voted
little
on
bit more.
20%,
But that's
could
still
be
not
that they
bad.
could, you know, they could end up
Yeah.
with 20% of the
6,000
vote.
signatures.
Oh,
Yeah, isn't it?
You'd have to be very,
you'd have to go across the
yeah, you'd
tape.
have to be really into what it
So
is.
figure you need
Oh,
about
they
10.
do on a
And have to have
charter
a
change.
group
of people that agree.
They have to have.
So I knew it's never been done, so
Signatures.
I don't want to use the word onerous, but I think it's fairly onerous.
So we're gonna say,
But it is possible.
well, it's a big change, those are big changes, that would be people coming in saying, you know, we're gonna do the changes and we're gonna do
Well,
all
I
this.
was involved with the limiting the powers of the governor's council many
It was a
years ago.
sizable amount.
Or a new charter.
That was like about 50,000 signatures across the state.
Just before you leave, I
Yeah.
do have a report, you want
Yes.
to take
Yes.
it with you? And
Yes.
so Sheila, you can take that, who you guys can have. But I just have one thing to
no,
ask
please,
your
yeah.
permission. Glenn Hawley from McPanmas Challenge, they want to use the parking lot on Sunday, August 5th for the 33rd annual PAMAS Challenge. And they need the grounds from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. They've been doing this for the past few years. So,
Is there a motion?
I'll move that.
I'll second.
okay.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, unanimous. Oh, somebody's coming to our meeting next week?
No, they've asked, you're referring to the Coastal Resources
Right.
Committee, part of me.
They want us to-
Lowercase r.
We were invited.
They've invited Dick Kraus and Bill Clark to go to their meeting,
Oh, their
which is
meeting.
next
Oh,
June
okay.
28th,
Right.
2 p.m., to talk about the ARC.
Right.
And they were
Anybody
Bill
wants-
told me they were gonna extend an invitation to you guys, so I told them.
Oh, okay. And then the mosquito control, now, if they're ready next week, they're expecting to put a letter together
Yeah, the board's gonna write
outlining
us a
what they
letter.
want.
They're gonna
So we
ask
should
us-
have that in advance
Yes.
if they're coming, so we have an opportunity to.
Yeah, I told them when we get the letter, we'll set something up.
So,
Right.
okay.
Yep.
Right, okay.
And then next week is the graduation. the
Next,
fourth-
June 29th is the band, the Barnstable Drug Court's graduation, yeah. And then I just mentioned that Pat and I were we put our retirement hat on yesterday. and we reviewed our most recent actuarial report, and it was good news. We managed basically to keep the same funding schedule that we had, which is a 6% increase in 2014, 6% in 2015, which the towns are aware of. That's what was in the old schedule. And we were also able to reduce our actuarially assumed rate of return. We reduced it from 8% to 7 7/8, 7.875. Wow, which is good.
Well, it's better
You're
than
trying to bring it down.
increasing
Better than
opening
increasing
it.
it. So, I mean, what we heard at NACRS, which was the retirement conference in Hyannis a couple weeks ago, is that that's what you need to start focusing on, is getting it to come down. So that, and we think long-term, rather than earning 8% in investments, we're probably going to be earning less than that, so it's important to get that down so that you don't have to worry about extending it.
It was a very good report from the actuary.
Yep.
And very good news. We're doing a great job on the retirement board, I
Yeah.
want you to know,
Yeah.
as your appointed member. That's working out very well.
It's hard to be humble when you're
Yes, it
perfect in
is,
every,
isn't it?
in your- in every way.
Okay.
Thank you for
anything
allowing
else?
me to
Yeah.
skip a
Motion.
little bit.
Well,
Motion, you want to
I
continue
just want,
this?
I just want to mention that I went to the Young Professionals
Thank you.
meeting this morning, and
Thank you,
Senator
everyone.
Wolf has made the announcement that he wants the county to get involved with giving both health insurance and homeowners insurance in the county.
There you go.
Well,
Well,
Dan Wolf has
if we get
talked
ourselves
about
straightened out.
That's what he told me.
Advocate and health insurance and having something that it can be Cape-wide. And you remember Mary Zeppernick,
Yeah,
years ago,
yeah.
they had that whole Cape Care program
Cape Care,
that
that's
unfortunately didn't go anywhere because it was based on taxation. But, I mean, it's something to think about.
Well, I think the homeowners thing is something to think about if we just develop the right kind of risk pool
Mm-hmm.
and let's say, get some cooperation on it, because right now with the FAIR plan, it doesn't take into account what the real exposure is. It just takes into account what some underwriter does in London someplace. It doesn't really look at this place,
Well,
just
you
says it
know,
looks at the ocean.
Start rating.
I hate to say this, it'll create a whole lot of work, but my friend, who's just retiring from Westdale Gas and Electric next month, he was the comptroller. He was instrumental in forming a risk pool, a cooperative, and they charter in Vermont. They're,
Oh, good.
charter, which maybe that's something that we should look into. Maybe I should ask him if he would be willing to maybe consult on the ability to sort of do that. Obviously, he's Westfield Gas and Electric, so it was a utility risk pool. But they put that together. We're actually in it for CVEC. It works very well. He's no longer associated with it, so there's no conflict. But it's PERMA was his name. Maybe there's an opportunity to do something with them or to form your own. It's a captive, basically.
Yeah, the Vermont allows captives.
Yeah.
Because our insurance company, Maya, the cost of reinsurance in both property casualty, workers' compensation, and even health insurance has just escalated enormously.
Yeah, reinsurance is
30%,
Yeah.
40% increases in reinsurance.
Yeah.
So Maya formed a captive.
Oh.
And Massachusetts does not allow captives,
No.
but Vermont does. So Maya formed its captive in Burlington. And it's called Maya Re, which is reinsurance.
Right.
And so I think Maya put $5 million into the captive.
Right.
So now they still have to have reinsurance, so, but I know, in fact, we have a conference call on it tomorrow because they were able to get the costs down a little bit.
Right.
But then there's that cushion that's in the, I should call
Right, you
it
have to
cushion,
hold
it's
on to
not a
so
cushion.
much cap.
But there,
Yeah.
yes, you have to hold on to it,
Yeah.
and now it's in the captive in Vermont.
Yeah.
Well, I just,
So, it was a great experience being part of creating that captive.
Well, this must be an issue on any coastal community.
yeah,
don't you
well,
think?
it's also a business opportunity, because if you recognize that there's a high profit activity on the part of the present suppliers.
Until the hurricane blows through.
Well, but the thing is, on a hurricane
Well-
blowing through, it doesn't blow through every year, and
Yeah.
you're charged every year. And if you take a look at the interval, it's not across the whole area, it's only in parts of the area. So in terms of establishing a risk, if this were the dreaded private sector, this looks like a profit opportunity if you had somebody that was well capitalized. And I think as far as starting something off, I think that government entities do have access to capital and have the opportunity to support something like that. So I think he's on the right track.
Well, think of the cost that Maya had on Munson, you know, where the tornadoes
Yeah,
went
exactly,
through.
right, it's just a
Huge
question of
costs
that, yeah.
related to that.
Yeah.
But in any case.
So let me talk to him a little bit, bring something back, you know?
Because we already have a co-op, right? So we have some experience with how that works.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move to adjourn.
Second,
All right.
all those in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned until